Welcome to the Thrive on Plants podcast, where we teach women how to thrive on plants and live with purpose. I'm Dr. Daphne, and I am your host. Today's episode is going to be a little different. We are going to spend a little time talking about a personal setback I've had and my recovery journey for the past 4 or 5 months. I'm here today with Leif, the founder and CEO of The Vegan Gym, and Leif is going to help me share with you my story.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here. So thank you for having me. And I was actually there when this happened. I was a couple feet away from you when this happened. So I've been able to watch kind of the adversity you've gone through and all that you've put into overcoming these struggles. So let's jump in and just kind of set the stage. So can you just walk us through what happened that day? What were we doing, and how did your injury occur?
So Saturday, September 7th, 2024, we were running a Tough Mudder as a coaching team. The Tough Mudder was in Pennsylvania, and it was a 10-mile event. That a Tough Mudder, for those of you who don't know, it's an obstacle course race where you run, you do obstacles, and you keep running. But we were doing it as a team, and the goal was no man left behind. It was the end of our coaches retreat week, and I thought it would be a perfect way for us to overcome some of our challenges and to do something fun as a team. I will be honest with you, I hate being muddy, and I hate being cold, and I hate being wet. So I went into this with trepidation, because I knew all of those were going to be the case. And
it was not a warm day. It's quite cold, actually.
And it was a muddy day. So we had a great time. I think we actually got wet and muddy at the first obstacle. So after that, it was just, well, it's over. Let's just keep going. And we were 8 miles into the 10-mile event when I was navigating an overhead, almost like a monkey bar, and which pisses me off because I trained for months on the monkey bar. I was a monkey bar fiend. And we were transitioning from a kind of a neutral grip to a rock climbing grip. And I lost my grip and I fell to the ground. And I expected to land and just pop up and go start over again. But I can actually remember, it was almost in slow motion, when I hit the ground and then I felt it, then I saw my ankle kind of off at 90 degrees. I'm like, not good. So yes, the Tough Mudder toughed me at 8 miles in.
It mudded you too.
It mudded me too. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just in front of Daphne going across this obstacle, and I kind of heard a commotion behind me. And when I looked back, I saw Daphne on the ground, and her leg, as she just mentioned, was off at a very unnatural angle. Clearly was not good. So what were your kind of immediate thoughts and emotions at that point? Did you start feeling anything at that point, or was just all in kind of focused fix it mode? Or what was your mindset?
I'll be honest, my first thought that I can recall was, dang, I'm not going to finish this thing. And so there was a little bit of frustration. There was a little bit of, I remember just thinking to keep it together, because I didn't want to upset anyone else, knowing that I knew what I'd done. And I didn't know how bad it was, though. But my immediate thoughts were, well, got to get to urgent care, hospital, figure out what's going on, and just get this taken care of. I'm very much just kind of fix it, but I wasn't projecting forward. I was just thinking in the now. What's the next thing I have to do? And I was even thinking more along the lines of, oh, I got to make sure the guys get the car keys and that because I had driven the group, that they can get the vehicle back and just the tactical things of what was going to happen next.
Yeah, I have never seen someone just as cool and put together in a injury situation as you were that day. And the other coaches and I were talking about that after you went to the hospital, and we all concluded that none of us would have operated in the same way. We would have screamed or whatever, started freaking out. But you just, yeah, you could clearly see your leg was not in a good spot, and you were just really dialed in. And I heard, I mean, you didn't scream, you didn't kind of even indicate that you were in pain, which I'm sure was not the case. And yeah, you were just really dialed in. And I think that's a very admirable quality that is something I strive to embody as well. But you kind of don't know until you're in a situation like that. Like, how am I actually going to respond?
That is true.
It's nice to think that I would operate that way, but it's one thing to think that is how you would act, and it's another thing to actually be in a situation like that. So yeah, you ended up, and we actually heard that from the guys, the first responders who came. I don't know if they told you that there were two guys who came over like in a Gator, all-terrain vehicle, and they came to pick you up. And I'm not sure if you overheard him say it or if he said it to you, but the one guy was like, wow, I've never seen anyone be this calm in a situation like this. And yeah, so we did the handoff with all the keys and stuff, and you went to the hospital. We finished the race, and by the way, we were less than a mile away from the finish line at that point. So that was, yeah, that's kind of even more unfortunate. But yes, you went to the hospital, and how'd you kind of start processing that, the road of recovery ahead of you? How'd you start processing that, and how did you mentally prepare yourself for the long road of recovery ahead of you?
If I had known, the good thing, Leif, is I didn't actually know everything that was going to happen in the weeks ahead. Initially, I would say was very tactical. When I got to the local hospital in their emergency department, and I realized that I was not going to be going home with you guys, it became very, how do I get my stuff? How do I prepare everything that needs to be done around, I need to get my belongings. I need to get ready I was being transferred to the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center because the hospital I was at, after they saw the injury, they said, we can't take care of this here. So when I arrived there, had a CT scan, and it revealed a spiral fracture of my right tibia and fibula. They gave me, under sedation, they set it, they moved it into position, put on a cast, and then said, we need to send you someplace else because can't do it here. And two of our team members, Mark and Nathan, they were great. They came and they sat with me for a couple hours. And when I realized that I was going to be there overnight because they couldn't get transport, I sent them back to meet with you all at the Airbnb. But my immediate processing was more on the acute management of the situation, knowing that all of my belongings were at our Airbnb, all of you were going to be leaving, and I was going to be in a different city. And it was more logistical than thinking about how am I going to recover. when I was transferred to UPMC the next morning, and there, unfortunately, they took down the cast and they decided to reduce me again. So had two reductions under just mild sedation, and after that came in and said, you're going to need surgical intervention. We'll admit you. And that's when I started to realize, okay, this is going to be a journey, because I've had one injury. So I tore my Achilles as a resident, and I knew what that kind of recovery was like, but I'd never broken a bone before. And I could tell from just talking to the ortho resident that, she's like, this is a significant fracture. So again, I got tactical, and thank you so much for your help in helping me get my stuff to UPMC, because that was a journey in itself.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an ordeal.
God.
That's so many things that you don't think about, like needing to figure out logistics for. Like it was just a kind of a weird situation. And anyways, we don't need to get into the details, but yeah, getting Daphne her stuff from the Airbnb, which was a couple hours away, ended up, and I didn't have time to kind of drive over and then come back, because it was like totally in the opposite direction. So anyways, and then we went through like 4 different drivers who said that they were going to pay. Anyways, it's a whole different story.
Yes.
So let's so you had a spiral fracture. In layperson terms, not to get too graphic, but just kind of to paint the picture, it's like kind of taking a bone and like twist it. So you take a bone, you twist it until it kind of like starts breaking. Yeah. Which is not a pretty sight. So imagine taking a twig or something and just twisting it until it snaps. So yeah, kind of, yeah.
And it was, so I had a distal, so toward the ankle it was broken, but then the fibula was also broken more proximal, up closer to my knee. So that's where some of the twisting motion came into it. Long story short, I was admitted, and the next morning, fortunately, the trauma team had a spot on their, someone ate breakfast. And so they got kicked off the OR schedule, and I got put into the OR schedule. And I had a long chat with the surgeon, a little bit of background. I trained at UPMC, so I knew the people there, which was great. They're trusted. I mean, some of the best ortho trauma people that I know of. But he said, this is not a good fracture. And what we're going to do to start is to put you in an external fixator, allow some of the swelling to resolve, and then decide what we're going to do from there.
So again, kind of in layperson speak, you had this kind of outside, what's another way we could explain it? You had pins going into from the outside to hold your leg in place.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. It was so they aligned the bones when I was in the operating room. Then they put pins in through the skin into the bone, and then had a metal device that was external to the leg that the pins interfaced into to keep them stable.
Yeah. So this kind of like external structure that's helping to keep your bones in the right spots.
And scaffolding. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what at that point did you have any idea of the timeline that recovery would take? I guess at that point you knew that this was going to be a 2 surgery process.
I did. Yeah.
So what was kind of going through your mind at that point?
Well, first I was thinking about, do I get this done here or do I go back home? Because I was still in Pennsylvania and I live in Virginia. So that was question one. Question 2 was, is my insurance going to pay for this if I get it done here? Question 3 in my head was, I'm not going to be able to train for a while. So what am I going to do in order to keep myself healthy? And then the fourth thing, which became very clear, was, how am I going to eat? Because these people don't know how to feed a vegan. Those were all the things I was thinking of in terms of the logistics for how I was going to have the second surgery, and then the physical nature of how do I keep moving while I'm going through recovery, so that, at that point, I'd spent all summer training for the Tough Mudder. I was in good shape, and I didn't want to lose any of that, or as little of that as possible.
Yeah, I want to get into the hospital nutrition a little bit. It's definitely an important topic that I'd love to hear your perspective on. But as far as the really soon thereafter, you started posting videos in our community with doing like little bicep curls, or just like doing whatever you could to just stay active, even though you were in a hospital bed, even though you had this external thing with pins into your leg. So what would you say to, I love the mindset of do what you can with what you have.
Exactly.
So could you just speak to that a little bit and how you apply that during challenging times in your life?
Probably two things. I agree with you. Do what you can with what you have. So I thought about it in terms of, it's not what I can't do, it's what I can do. So what can I still do is number one. And then the other one was control the controllables. So I tried to keep on my regular routine, even though I was in the hospital. Got up, my normal time, I would wake up. I started doing dips on my walker in the morning because I could. I tried to participate in the challenges that we were having that week to the extent that I could, even though I was in bed. The V-sit challenge, things that you still could do. It wasn't perfect, but I still could do it. So sticking to my routine, I think, and my routine was always moving in the morning was the goal. How do I continue to do my routine? You can train anywhere. You don't have to be in a gym. So doing curls, I was taking saline bottles and doing curls and using the saline bottle to do an overhead press. It was what was available to me in my hospital room. And being creative is part of, again, it's what can I do with what I have at this point in time? And how do I continue to be me, even though I have this external fixation device on my leg?
Yeah, that's such a powerful mindset, and it's heavily aligned with your favorite quotes. Everything is figure outable. So there is a path forward here. Mm-hmm. I just need to find it and keep an open mind to discover what that looks like for me in this situation. Exactly. And I think that's really important. So you mentioned having a walker. What was it like to go from running 10 miles with relative ease to, hey, I need to use a walker to get around?
It sucked. So first thing, using a walker with one leg is not easy. Going back to conversations we have about strength, you need upper body strength to use a walker. Not necessarily when you're using two legs, but I couldn't even touch down with my right leg. So to propel myself forward, I had to use my left leg and my upper body, which meant a lot of triceps work and a lot of shoulder work. So the physical therapists were like, thank God your upper body's strong, because I was able to, get up and down the hall relatively easily, even right from the beginning. But that's because I had a foundation. But I never, even in my own head, I think a walker was always for someone who was sick. And I've never seen myself as someone who's not healthy. So the the initial proposal to get a walker, I was kind of like, rough. But it was the only way I was going to be able to get to the toilet by myself. And so it was my independence versus having to push the call button every time I needed something. And I just chose the walker.
So you were moved to an outpatient facility. I'm not sure what you would call it, but you were surrounded by people a lot older than you who were heavily dependent on walkers, wheelchairs, etc. And clearly the most fit in there just kind of lumped in due to your circumstances. But what was that kind of experience like, and what did it feel like to be in that kind of environment?
That was a reminder to me why I do what I do every day. I do not want to be there ever again. So after the initial surgery, the plan was for me to take about 7 days, allow the swelling to resolve, and then come back for the definitive fixation. And so I went to a acute care facility. It was outpatient, but it generally is someplace where you think of. It was mainly older people, to your point, coming who need longer term care. And I was easily the youngest person there at the time. There are many people who are bedridden, many people with walkers. And as I would walk up and down the hall with my walker, I just saw what I don't want to be when I'm in my 70s, 80s. And even the nurses would say that when they were coming in to do my wound care. They would, because I would talk to them about how I ate, what I did. They were asking me how the injury occurred, and they were just saying so many people that they were taking care of would benefit from doing what I was doing now, so that they wouldn't necessarily have to be there. And I never want to be in that position again.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the importance of taking control of your health and really wanting that for your own independence and vitality. And that's something that you need to want it for yourself in order to, like, the opportunity is available to you. But you need to want to seek that. And even if you don't have the health, the fitness, the vitality that you want to have, and it looks like there's a long road ahead of you, it just really starts with one step and putting one foot in front of the other. And even if that requires using a walker, you're just making some forward progress. And I think that's really important. So I think at that facility, or you think at that facility, you were diagnosed with MRSA. So that threw an extra wrench into the recovery process. So could you talk a little bit more about that experience?
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating because so I had a follow-up appointment with my orthopedic surgeon on a Tuesday, and on the weekend prior, my Oura ring started telling me my temperature was elevated. And I was just like, but I wasn't getting any vitals in the care facility. So they weren't taking my temperature, doing any of that while I was there. It was really just there for mainly wound care. But so Saturday, Sunday, Monday, my Oura is like, your body temperature is elevated. Are you feeling okay? And it wasn't until late Monday, early Tuesday that I started seeing some redness and some swelling around my pin site. And so I was transported to my orthopedic surgery appointment that morning, and he looked at it. He's like, "Oh, you've got an infection." We didn't know at the time it was MRSA. He's like, "This doesn't look good." And so they admitted me again. They took me to the operating room the next morning, and that's where they took wound cultures, found out that it was MRSA. Well, not immediately then. They they removed the pins and they replaced the pins with new pins. So this is surgery 2. I now have 4 pinholes instead of 2 pinholes. And they took wound cultures at the time of the replacing the pins, and he must have known or had a suspicion, because he sent infectious disease to see me. And the next day when the infectious disease fellow came in, and she's like, "You've got MRSA." And MRSA is methicillin resistant Staph aureus, which is it's something we all hear about. It's usually a hospital acquired, or it's acquired from the transmission from either someone who has MRSA or a healthcare provider who may have transferred it to you as they were taking care of another individual who has MRSA. But it because it is resistant to many different types of antibiotics, it's a bad bug to get. And at that point, I knew it was kind of an oh shit moment, because you don't want MRSA in your bone, you don't want MRSA in your soft tissue. And I knew that just from my history in the healthcare field, that they wouldn't actually repair my broken bone while I had an active infection. So that diagnosis clarified for me that this was going to be a long road, because then I knew already I'm going to have to be on IV antibiotics. So I talked with the ID doc, I talked with the surgeon, and they put in an indwelling catheter, a PICC line, because I said, I need to go home. I'm not going to another facility only to get some other type of infection. Just send me home. I will take care of myself better than anyone else can. And then we'll figure out how to, when the time is right, for me to get my open reduction internal fixation. But that was a sentinel moment that I knew. And I think the other thing, your brain starts to spin, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this could be bad. I could lose my leg. What happens if I can't relive? Yeah, all those things started going through my head. But I knew I had to get home and take care of myself.
So you've got a severely broken leg. You have this outside structure with 4 pins into your leg. You have MRSA. You are getting around, hobbling around on a walker, and they're going to send you home to take care of yourself. And also I would like to note that Daphne was working through this entire period. Our whole team is remote, and she just is showing up and just getting things done. And I just, really appreciate the level of effort that you always put into your work and showing up to our team. But going through all of this and battling those challenges and still showing up in big ways, both as much as you can for your health, in staying active to the best of your ability, and working to navigate nutrition in the hospital, which also was no easy feat, and staying on top of work and everything. It was inspiring to watch you go through this. But what was your thought? What was kind of going through your head as you were being transported home? Did that feel like I guess you were probably excited to be home back in your environment, but what were kind of your thoughts at that point regarding your recovery and what that looked like?
I'll be honest, it was a little scary, because I knew I had no one at home to help. So everything I had to do was going to rely on me. And I gained a new perspective. So just getting to the airport, so I flew home, getting to the airport, getting through security, getting to the gate on one leg. I gained a new respect for anyone who's traveling with any kind of disability or injury, because the people at the airport were so helpful, but at the same time, sitting at the gate for a while, then I'm like, oh no, I got to pee. Then you need to have someone. So some gentleman came. He couldn't take me into the women's room, so I'm hopping on one leg to get into the stall. It was just a cluster. And the same thing on the plane. I was able to get on the plane, but then they had to get almost 2 people to carry me off the plane. The travel itself was humbling and painful, but got it done. I had an amazing Uber driver who picked me up at the airport when I got to Virginia, landed at Dulles, and I'm still by myself, and I get to, and by the way, they didn't send me out the hospital with a walker. So,
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
no,
You didn't have a cane, nothing?
I was hopping. It was all hops. So I got into the cab to get to the airport. When I got to the airport, had to get valet to get me into a wheelchair. Wheeled my way into, to the gate. Hopped onto the plane, off the wheelchair. Hopped out of the plane onto another wheelchair, and then hopped into the Uber. And when I got to my apartment building, literally, I was like, oh, F, I have no idea how I'm going to get to my apartment. But the Uber driver was amazing. He was this kind older gentleman. And when he realized that I was by my own, I actually, he let me put my hand on his shoulder and he walked me up to my apartment. So whoever you are, thank you very much. But and that's when life really hit home, because I had to do everything on my own at that point. I had to get to the bathroom. I had to cook my food. I had to get to bed. I had to figure out how to live on one leg. And fortunately, I have a very small apartment, so it's not as if I had stairs to go up, but those are the types of things you don't think about. Even when you're healthy, you don't think about it. I took so much for granted. Even just going to the bathroom was an ordeal. And I ordered a walker as soon as I got in. So thank God for Amazon. But the first night I actually used my suitcase as a pseudo walker. And I think there's a video out there where I'm kind of using my suitcase to lean on, and I'm like, okay, got to get this done. And it was just a matter of being a little bit of a MacGyver and figuring out how to get her done.
Yeah, man, that requires a lot of strength and perseverance. So very much admire how you've showed up in this recovery journey. So let's talk a little bit about the healthcare system and your experience with the healthcare system. So as a physician, I'm curious to dive into your personal experience going through the healthcare system recently. This is just a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in navigating the complexities and inefficiencies of our healthcare system?
I'm going to try and be nice as I say this. Our healthcare system sucks. It's horrible. The people, the surgeons, the nurses, they were amazing. Social work, everyone is trying to do their best possible to help you navigate the system. Because I'll just start at the top. First thing was I was in a hospital outside of the state where I was, and I had United Healthcare insurance, and they were only going to cover parts of my hospital stay. So the first day, the social worker came in and started talking to me about what's covered, what's not covered, going to, that interim care facility, what my options were. They were coming back in with places that were 1, 2, 3 stars. I'm like, I'm not going here. And it was interesting being a patient, because you forget what, we write orders and we say transfer to this facility, or, do this. And it just happens, but you forget what's happening to the people on the other side. So trying to find a facility to get to that had quality ratings that I was comfortable with, that took a while. And then making sure several of the places that I initially chose, my insurance wouldn't cover. So my blood pressure is going up even as I think about it. I was being having healthcare background, it was helpful to me. And again, I think this is why it's always great to have an advocate, because I knew questions to ask, even in terms of pre-procedure, what are my options? So my surgeon was great. We sat down, we looked at the films together, and I said, what would you do given the severity of the injury? The same thing even with the MRSA. What would you do? Talk to ID, talk to ortho. We all agreed it was a several-week course of IV antibiotics before any second, the third procedure would even be viable. But the frustration of having to fight with the insurance company to get the things that I needed was amazing. Even one of the reasons I didn't have the walker with me, didn't have a wheelchair when I got there, when I got home, it was fighting uphill the whole way. The fight continued even after I got home, because so now I have a PICC line. I'm getting IV antibiotics delivered to my home, and I'm administering the IV antibiotics myself. A nurse was only going to come in once a week just to do the PICC line dressing change. First time she came in, she was awesome. She's like, oh, I'm going to order you these supplies. We'll do this. She texts me back, your insurance company won't cover the supplies. So I have to go on Amazon. I have to order my own dressing change supplies. I'm fortunate that I had the means to do so, and I knew how to do so, but that's not everyone. And so people are falling through the cracks, I'm sure, that because they're not able to do what they need to do. It is so broken, and I know how to ask the questions. I can understand what's being said to me. And I was struggling and I was frustrated.
Yeah, that makes challenging situations, unfortunate situations, really hard situations that much more challenging. And to feel like you don't have support in your corner makes it all overwhelming. And I think the fact that you have a background in all of this and you still face a lot of these challenges, and people without a medical background, without a understanding of the healthcare system going through that just really is a challenge. And we don't need to get into like recent news, but that's certainly been kind of top of mind recently in the news, and something that a lot of people have been vocal about and sharing their experiences and frustrations dealing with the healthcare system. And I want to believe that there is a much better model, but the main focus that I have in hearing stories like this just goes to doing all I can from a preventative perspective. And obviously this wasn't any kind of, this wasn't due to, the situation wasn't due to any health negligence on your part, but to the greatest extent possible, how can we empower ourselves to live healthful lives where we don't need to rely on the healthcare system to a great extent outside of traumatic injuries like the one that you went through. How can we do our best to remain healthy and fit and maintain our independence? But clearly there are things that need to change, and it's hard to see a path to that changing. So do you have any thoughts on what the kind of future of healthcare looks like, or if that's still a little too dark, then what do you see as maybe some opportunities? Like, do we have any kind of hope with our healthcare system?
I think I always have hope. But the biggest change that needs to occur is to appropriately align incentives. And the reimbursement model we have today doesn't necessarily incentivize always doing the right thing or focusing on prevention. And it's not the care teams, but and I hate to pick on United, but they have the insurance, they own their insurance company, they have a pharmacy, they're a closed loop model, and they are incented to save dollars. And so until there's a wholesale reframing of what it means to deliver care and how we don't incentivize necessarily procedures, we incentivize prevention. For traumatic injuries, yes, those are unavoidable. But even things like the ambulance ride I had, United didn't cover that. So every ambulance ride I had was almost $1,500 out of pocket. Unexpected, unanticipated expenses. They didn't cover all of the labs that I needed drawn while I was on IV antibiotics. I didn't choose to be on IV antibiotics, but you're not covering what's needed to make sure I don't have unintended consequences from the medication. Okay. They didn't cover all of my ID consults. There has to be an understanding that we need to cover the care that is necessary and sufficient in order for people to get healthy. But we also need to find a way to cover, and you see this happening on a smaller scale. Why are we not incentivizing people to get healthy food? So when you see food as medicine programs, or you see prescriptive pharmacies, those are the types of things that will help keep people healthy. But there's no money going there. And until there's someone who can look at the healthcare system holistically and change the incentives from pharma, which are huge, change the incentives from the healthcare system, because if the healthcare system doesn't make money, their doors don't stay open. I was there. I know and worked with the healthcare plans on a lot of our reimbursement models. So I could see the misincentives. It's one of the reasons I left. I wasn't doing the right thing. But that's going to take someone who can stand up and say this has to change. But there's a lot of strong lobby power to keep things the same.
Yeah, there's a quote along the lines of "Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the outcomes."
Yeah,
and
that's where it is.
Very much the case here as well. And something I think you make a really important point, that if I have this full coverage insurance and my care requires X, Y, and Z items, how can that not be part of what is covered? And I think the ambulance ride would be a good example of that. This is not a life or death situation for you to be taking an ambulance. Like, you didn't just have a heart attack and you're being rushed to the hospital. This is just to transport you to another facility. But you also, the hospital, my understanding is the hospital wouldn't release you to an Uber.
No.
Like you have to you are required to use an ambulance for transport, but they will not, but then the insurance company will not cover it. That's not right.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to others on advocating for themselves within the healthcare system?
Those are some of the things that we will definitely have conversations with on this podcast, because the more knowledge you have about what questions to ask, my advice is to ask questions and to understand what your options are. Don't always assume that when someone tells you this is what's going to do, that it's the only option. It's always helpful to say, what are the other alternatives and what are the risks and benefits associated with them? Because you may choose a different pathway based on your own priorities and how you weigh the risks and benefits. The other thing I would say is if you can take someone with you, especially if you're receiving a tough diagnosis or if it's a crucial conversation, sometimes you hear it, but you don't process it. And one thing that I've been able to do with others in our community is help them write out a list of questions. Okay, you're going to talk to your surgeon. Here's some things I would advise you to ask about what's being recommended, and making sure they walk through your films with you and that you are as informed as possible, because ultimately you are the decision maker. You can't fully abdicate the decision to someone else. The model we have is very paternalistic in that regard. And, 9 times out of 10, yes, we think we know what's best, but a collaborative care model is really taking the time to say, Leif, here are the options. Here's your diagnosis. Here are the options. What should we do together? That's the kind of care team you want in your corner, not the care team that's just going to say, you're just going to do this. That's the way it's going to be. You're done.
So let's talk about nutrition a little bit through the healthcare system. Obviously, being plant-based, wanting whole food plant-based options in a hospital is a little too much to ask for these days. What were some of the biggest nutrition challenges that you faced?
Oy. First of all, I want to thank our good friend Jake for bringing me a healthy meal when I was at my first hospital stay. The hospital menus are atrocious. There are some plant-based options on there. You can get some green beans, you can get some potatoes, you can get a romaine salad, you can get pieces and parts of what people consider to be plant-based. But it's not as if someone is looking at the menu and saying, if we have patients who are here who are healing and they need their protein, they need their carbs, they need their fat, what can we provide them holistically that's a balanced plate for someone who is, trying to heal from either an acute or chronic injury? And that wasn't there. I give kudos to UPMC because they actually sent someone up to talk to me after I expressed some unhappiness with the food options that I was being provided with. And I shared some resources from PCRM about how hospitals can become more plant-based and vegan-friendly. But my challenge was actually getting enough nutrition. And I could, losing weight was, a lot of people want to lose weight. You don't want to be undernourished while you're healing. That's the wrong time not to be getting as much antioxidants and nutrients as possible. And so I struggled every day to find things on the menu that were satisfying and not overcooked or underseasoned. And it wasn't fun. And the same thing when I went to, so it was actually cute when I went to the intermediate care facility, the cook came up to my room and she's like, I don't know what to make for you. And so I had her buy some tofu, told her how to cook the tofu. So I made some suggestions, and she was wonderful. She tried hard to, and anyone who's cooked tofu knows the first time you cook it, it's not always the best. So the first couple days I was like, oh, this is bad. But they were trying. They heard and they were trying. But it's not standard for most healthcare facilities, unless you're in, New York, where they definitely have a huge focus on New York City, on providing plant-based meals to patients, and other areas spotted around the country. It's not going to be the standard. But I think the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine is giving people tools and toolkits to make it more the norm, so that people who are plant-based do have the options. But the other piece to that is plant forward should be the standard option, because that's the healthiest option. Sending a heart patient up eggs and bacon, and I know it just doesn't make sense to me either, but that's where we are today. And the advocacy that we all can do is to speak up. Every person will be heard. You may not feel that your voice is heard, but if they continue to hear us, because we are in the healthcare system, there will be change over time.
So a pessimistic side of me wonders, is there an element of healthy food is not really aligned with the incentives of sick care? Or am I going a little too dark there?
I think about the same thing. Yeah. Are we feeding the system by continuing to perpetuate chronic disease? I go to the same dark place, because in many ways, it would be almost less expensive to have a more plant-based hospital menu than to have some of the animal proteins that are on there. But we haven't done, there's not a randomized controlled study looking at hospital A and hospital B and what are the outcomes for the population. That's not going to happen. But we know inherently the data are there that plant-based options are going to be better for all of us. And I would beg leaders in the healthcare system to do the right thing and use that as the step forward. So make plant-based the primary option. People can opt out. Sort of like, I think one of our coaches was sharing at a fast food restaurant in Europe, if you get a Burger King burger, it's going to be a plant-based burger. You have to choose the animal-based option. Why not have hospitals provide the plant-based option as the primary option? And if you choose to have a non-plant-based option, then you're making an intentional choice.
Yeah, that's interesting. I vaguely remember reading a article about some study, perhaps that was conducted by PCRM, where I believe they did that in a hospital setting, where I need to look into the details on this, but I remember feeling really hopeful in reading this, because a majority of the people were like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll have this bean burger, and only a small percentage, small being I think somewhere on the order of 30% of people were opting for the animal-based option, which I think that sounds like a great step in the right direction. So regardless of what the exact numbers are, just leading with, as you said, a more plant-forward approach, and not saying, hey, you can't have bacon and eggs, or you can't have this burger, but this beef burger, but those are not our primary options.
Exactly.
So you need to ask for this, and like a pack of cigarettes, that should come with a little warning label on it, especially in a hospital setting.
This may kill you.
Yeah. This, you just had a heart attack, and this is not aligned with your optimal recovery path. But that's probably a long way out at this point. What were some of your kind of go-to foods and supplements that you used to support healing and really focus on recovery?
The Once I was home, I went back to my normal diet. And that was the most beautiful thing about being home. I ate the same thing I eat now. I tried to meal prep what I could. It was hard initially because I couldn't stand up for long periods of time. I couldn't do my normal meal prep. So I was eating a lot of beans, chickpeas, tofu. I was having lots of chili because chili is, you can make it in big batches and it's easy. So all of the healthy foods that I love to eat, I didn't change what I ate. I just doubled down and make sure I was eating as much as I could while I was recovering. Because by the time I got home, I'd probably lost about 8 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And so I needed to get that back on. From a supplement perspective, they started me on vitamin D in the hospital, even though I was already taking it. My B12 was standard. I actually ordered creatine when I was in intermediate care. Like, I want to get my creatine back on board. So I had Amazon ship that to me. Though, and B12D, creatine, those were the big things. I didn't really add many supplements. Oh, that's not true. I also doubled down. My ID doc, fortunately, was also somewhat enlightened. And before I was discharged, she's like, do you need to take a prebiotic? I'm like, nope, I'm just going to eat my veggies. She's like, okay. She's like, what are you going to eat? I'm like, I got my sauerkraut, I got my kimchi. She's like, you're on it. So I wanted to keep my microbiome as healthy as possible too. And knowing I was going to be on a long course of antibiotics, I was scooping down the kimchi like mad.
Yeah, that does. Hearing these little stories of a chef who goes out of their way to prepare tofu, or doctors who are enlightened and just give you kind of a little pat on the back for being plant-based and prioritizing your nutrition, that does give me hope. And I'm optimistic for the future. And I want to see more of that change come to fruition. But the primary focus is just, in my mind, keeping yourself out of that system. Correct. And just focused on staying healthy and fit for as long as possible. So I know that you kind of journaled throughout this experience and you shared a lot of your journey with our community. How did that kind of help your healing process, and what kind of strength did you pull from that?
Like, writing for me is cathartic. Putting words on paper, I love to write, and it helped me process what was going on, but it also was an opportunity for me to share with people what you don't want to have happen, or things you can look out for, and hopefully also to motivate people to understand that you need to be a Weeble, because, yes, this happened to me. Yes, it was not fun, but that's in the past. It's done. What am I going to do now to move forward? So how do I keep training? How do I stay as strong? How does Daphne stay as strong as possible? Because I need that strength both for every day, and I want to come out on the other side not having lost a lot of progress that I made over time. So the journaling, the blogging was partly for me to process, and having to write it down and think about it was healing. And then the other thing was what I love to do, which is educating and sharing with people what I was eating, sharing with people, like the DEXA scan. So I'd had my bones are healthy. So that wasn't the source of my fracture. But even showing that the DEXA scan I had in August and the DEXA scan I had in November, it could have been really bad, but I gained muscle on my left side. Yes, I lost muscle on my right side. I didn't lose a lot of bone density. I lost visceral fat. So that, those 12 weeks or so that I was unable to get to the gym, I still was able to make progress. And because I controlled what I could control, and I continued to do what I could, even though, I couldn't move anything more than 10 pounds when I hit the pick line in. Dang, that was pissy. I couldn't put any weight on my right leg. Okay, can't do that. But my whole left side of my body's healthy. What can I do with that side? Knowing that some of that would translate to me maintaining my health on a broader perspective, because I was continuing to focus on movement, flexibility, strength whenever I could.
So we talk a lot about staying healthy and fit to maximize your health span, stay healthy and mobile and independent for as long as possible in your life. But as you were just talking, about like a before and after DEXA scan through this experience, I just kind of thought about this idea of building armor to be able to persevere through challenging situations like breaking your leg. So yeah, could you maybe pull on that thread a little bit? This idea of building up strength, building up muscle mass, building up flexibility, building up independence, building up your health so that you are able to better weather challenges like this.
It's funny that you put it that way. So we recently had Dr. Kelly and Juliet Starrett talk to our community, and what they talked to us about was durability. So how do you become durable? Because I opened up the conversation with one of their quotes, what is, the hits are going to come. You are going to take a hit at some point in time. But how do you create the durability so that maybe you've got a little Teflon, and when the hits come, you are better able to weather them? And it starts today. So your flexibility, your balance, you need flexibility and balance so that you can prevent yourself from falling if you accidentally step off a curb the wrong way, or if you trip over a rug or over your cat or your dog in the house. That may help you catch yourself. I was talking to Gwen Whitaker on Wednesday about the fact that, her father fell some years ago, and the fact that he could still do a forward roll was what allowed him to catch himself in his fall and just pop up again. So that little bit of flexibility and balance is helpful. The strength and the muscle is also an important part of being durable, because again, if I hadn't had that bit of armor, getting around on the walker would have been a challenge. There were days I worked up getting from my apartment to my mailbox, I worked up a sweat, because you're like, it's work. Even doing activities of daily living, trying to take the sheets off the bed, trying to get the pans out of the cupboard, just the little things that we do every day that we don't think about. You need that extra durability to continue doing them when you've taken a hit. It needs to be part of how we think about health and fitness, not later, but now. You want to create that resilience. You want to create that durability. You want that armor to be strong so that when you do suffer an either, unexpected incoming hit, that you have the ability to recover from it and bounce back to where you were.
Yeah, I love that word, durability. How can we prepare ourselves for the inevitable challenges that we're going to face in life, or these just kind of weird little freak accidents that we're all going to experience, whether it's tripping on a stair or tripping off the curb or falling in a really bad way, off some monkey bars or whatever it is, just being able to bounce back from that and not already be so close to the edge of sick and unhealthy that it just totally destroys you in a really bad way. Because those are, as you mentioned, those are inevitable. The challenges that we will all face physically and with our health, they are these little things that will pop up, whether it's tripping over a rug, etc. These are going to happen to you, and these still happen. I threw my back out this past week, and yeah, it sucks to go through that, but being able to still move around and have strength to support myself getting into bed or getting up and off the toilet or whatever it is, being able to have that strength and health because I continually work at that has really reaped a lot of benefits.
And you don't realize it. I mean, for anyone listening, hear what Leif is saying, because whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, or your 80s, that investment is worth it, because you can always get a little bit more durable no matter where you are. And the other thing that we talked about on Thursday was that this is an infinite game. So it's not that you get fit and then you stop. This is you're playing this for life. And if you think about it in that regard, it's not this thing I go do. I don't go lose weight or I don't go gain muscle and think that I'm done. It really is, how do you make this an infinite game in terms of, I need to continue to play this game every day as long as I'm living.
So you're coming up on 5 months post injury, and we're about to tackle a challenging hike in Zion National Park. I would love to just hear, where are you right now, mentally, physically, and what does the rest of your recovery process look like?
I feel like I'm in a good spot. So I received the okay to go to bear weight on my right leg the first week of December. So it's not been quite 2 months since I've actually been walking, and I've been able to walk 8 miles. I've actually walked 9 miles. I've been doing, on weekends, I'm doing hour-long treks I'm rucking on the incline treadmill with 35 pounds on my back.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's substantial.
Oh, it hurts like the dickens.
Yeah.
But again, the pain is temporary. I didn't start with 35 pounds. So anyone listening, I did not start with 35 pounds, but I worked up to that. So last Saturday did an hour with 35 pounds. Average grade was like 7%, and then did follow that with 20 minutes on the step mill. So I've been pushing myself to, the Misogi is important to me, and I want to be there, and I want to participate. And it's been a motivation to push myself through my recovery to help get to the point where I can at least get to Scouts Landing. I've been doing my PT, so I go to PT twice a week, Monday and Friday. I do my home PT every day because I still have significant limitation in my flexion and extension on the right side, which means that going down in particular, it's really hard. And I can't yet do, single leg. I can't do single leg calf raise on my right side. So I'm not able to run yet. I can walk, and I can walk well enough with weighted, carrying, rucking, that I can accomplish this, but I still have work ahead so that I can actually run. It may be that part of my limitation is mechanical, and it may be due to some of the hardware. So I was messaging, my surgeon is awesome, and again, to reiterate what you shared previously, one of his messages to me was that his job is easier because I'm healthy and because I'm motivated, as opposed to someone who came into this not healthy and maybe not motivated to improve. It helps, your surgeon can only do so much, your PT can only do so much. You have to carry the baton the next mile. And I may have another surgery in my future to remove some of the hardware because I'm not recovering that flexibility, which means, which may prevent me from running, because running is a single leg movement. So you need full strength and you need to get on your toes. And I need to be able to fully stand balanced on my right leg as on my left leg in order to run. And right now I'm not there yet, but I continue to work on it every day. So when you see me doing calf raises, I'm always working at it to try and get there.
Well, you definitely ooze motivation and determination. And I think that's how you've accomplished so much in your life and how you continue to persevere through challenges like this. What advice would you have for anyone facing a major setback in life, whether it's a physical setback or just a setback in general?
You can get through it. Everything is figure outable. It's hard. Getting knocked down is hard, but you have to realize you have to find a path forward one day at a time and just figure out, what do I need to do today to keep moving forward? And you need to take control of what you can control, because it's easy to feel like everything's out of your control, but that's not the case. Even the small things like my nutrition, when I wasn't getting what I thought I needed, again, having friends bring in food to the hospital, I ordered some protein bars from Amazon, doing what I needed to do to control what I knew I needed. So the advice would be, everything's figure outable, and maybe you need to, this is something I don't do well, you may need to ask for help. Sometimes you need to ask for help to continue moving forward. But then thirdly, control what you can control. And what you can't, you sometimes just have to let go. When I got MRSA, I was pissed because I knew that was going to set me back weeks. But I had to let it go and say, what do I need to do going forward? And figure out what are the next steps. Because I can't undo what was done. I can't undo that I fell. I can't undo that I got an infection. But I can do everything in my power to recover as best possible by focusing on my mindset, being positive, focusing on my nutrition, feeding my body, moving as much as I can. I prioritized sleep when I was recovering. So I was in bed trying to get, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, doing the stress reduction because I knew I was stressed. And my HRV tanked then too, which is, something I think I blogged about, but it was coming back up. And I used data. I did use the data to help facilitate my recovery. And I will say, I should have listened to my Aura ring.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. When my temperature started going up, that was a sentinel change that I probably blew off for a day or so. I probably should have called when it said I was having a low grade temperature. I probably should have called the surgeon then. But yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah. And what is the alternative is still being in the same situation, but complaining about it or throwing your hands up and just not making any forward progress. And that's just not going to benefit you. No. And I just really, really appreciate your mindset through all this. Really appreciate how you just have openly shared your journey and inspired our whole community, very much including myself. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, both before this podcast and during this podcast. And yeah, really hope that every listener leaves feeling inspired from your story.
Thanks, Leif. It's definitely been a journey. It's not over yet. But I know at some point I will be sharing with everyone that first run is going to be amazing.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Thrive with Plants. Reflecting on this journey has been very cathartic for me, and I hope that there's been a nugget in my journey that maybe you can apply to your journey. I think the key takeaways are that you have to be persistent. You have to be persistent and consistent. And taking one step forward every day is important, no matter how small that step may be. You also need to advocate for yourself. That is essential because no one else is going to speak for you but you. And it may sometimes be scary, but you know your body best, and you also know what's important to you best. Recovery is holistic. You need to think about all of the pillars when you're thinking about recovery. Your mindset, your nutrition, your movement, your sleep, what you're doing in terms of your environment, looking at your data. I will not ignore my data anymore, but then the other thing is the power of community. And I want to thank everyone in this community who sent me well wishes, who sent me gifts, who sent me puzzles, coloring books. Your energy and support have been instrumental in getting me to this point. And I hope that you've learned a little bit from my journey that you can apply to your journey or the journey of those you love. Challenges are opportunities for growth and discovery. I have grown a lot over the past several months, learned a lot about myself, and I hope that any of you who may be going through a similar journey, share your story. I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to cheer you on as you continue to make strides along your own path. If this episode resonated with you, please feel free to share it with someone who may be on their own journey and who could use some positive energy to help keep them motivated, to help keep them persistent, and to let them know that they're going to make it through. Subscribe, leave a review, share this with others. I would love also for you to join us on our community. If you go to thriveonplantslife.com, you'll be able to have access to other resources, connect with others, because community is so important. And if you don't want to type in the link, you can find it in the description below. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate all of your support, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. In the meantime, thrive with plants and live with purpose. The content provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Always seek the guidance of a physician or certified healthcare professional with any questions you have regarding your health, medical conditions, or treatments. While we aim to provide accurate and up-to-date information, the discussions shared on this podcast reflect the views of the host and our guest and may not align with your unique healthcare needs. Decisions related to your health and your wellness should be made in consultation with your healthcare team.